Love is a weakness, and I was not raised to be weak. Ethan Blackwood's voice carried across the grand ballroom with the calm certainty of a verdict, silencing nearly 200 guests beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers. He stood at the top of the marble staircase in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, one hand resting against the silver railing, his expression as cold and polished as the mansion surrounding him. At 32, Ethan was about to be named the sole heir to the Blackwood organization, a family empire built on loyalty, fear, and rules no one dared question. Reporters called him ruthless. Rivals called him untouchable. The people who worked inside his home simply lowered their eyes when he passed. That evening, every powerful figure in the room had come to witness him except the ring that had belonged to 3 generations of Blackwood men. Yet Ethan felt nothing as the applause rose around him. No pride, no joy, certainly no love. Then a champagne glass struck the floor. The sharp crack turned every head toward the far side of the ballroom, where Maya Carter stood beside a linen-covered service table, her dark hands steady even as broken crystal glittered near her shoes. She had not dropped the glass. Vivian Hale, Ethan's elegant fiancée, had swept it from the tray while turning too quickly, but the blame arrived before the final shards stopped moving. "Honestly, Maya," Vivian said, her smile thin enough to cut, "must everything become a scene when you are nearby?" A few guests laughed softly, relieved to have found someone safe to look down upon. Maya wore the simple black uniform of the household staff, her natural curls gathered into a neat bun, her posture straight despite the heat rising in her face. She could have apologized. Everyone expected her to. In that mansion, people with less power survived by accepting blame that did not belong to them. Instead, Maya looked calmly at Vivian and said, "I'll clean the glass, ma'am, but I won't confess to dropping it." The laughter died. Vivian's expression hardened. "You are a maid." Maya's eyes remained steady. "Yes, ma'am. That is my job, not my worth." The room went silent. From the staircase, Ethan watched her for the first time. He had seen Maya moving through the mansion for weeks, always quiet, always efficient, almost invisible among the dark wood and expensive paintings. But now she stood beneath the golden light with no title, no protection, and no fear in her voice. Something unfamiliar tightened in his chest. Vivian glanced toward Ethan, expecting him to restore order, tell her to apologize. Every face turned upward. Ethan descended the staircase slowly, each step measured, the silver heir's ring waiting in its velvet box behind him. He stopped several feet from Maya and studied the broken glass, then Vivian, then the woman who had refused to surrender her dignity for the comfort of powerful strangers. "Did you drop it?" he asked. "No, sir," Maya replied. Ethan held her gaze longer than necessary. For the first time that evening, the ruthless heir felt something stronger than indifference. He felt curious, and in Ethan Blackwood's world, curiosity was far more dangerous than love. Ethan did not look away from Maya. Around them, the ballroom seemed to hold its breath, every guest waiting for the heir to deliver the humiliation they believed was inevitable. Vivian folded her arms, confidence returning to her face as though the answer had already been decided. She had known Ethan for 3 years, long enough to understand that he valued control above comfort and appearances above explanations. A maid challenging his future wife in front of the most influential families in Chicago should have been an easy choice. But Ethan had also spent his life studying hesitation, and he had seen none in Maya's voice. "Then you will not apologize for something you did not do," he said. Vivian's smile disappeared. A murmur moved across the ballroom like wind beneath a closed door. Ethan turned toward the head of household. "Have the glass cleared before someone is hurt." His tone remained even, but the decision had already shifted the balance of the room. Maya lowered her eyes only long enough to acknowledge him. "Thank you, sir." There was no triumph in her voice, only quiet relief, and for reasons Ethan could not explain, that restraint unsettled him more than defiance would have. He returned to the staircase as the ceremony resumed, yet the words spoken around him blurred into ceremony and noise. His uncle praised discipline. His advisors spoke of legacy. The velvet box was opened, revealing the heavy silver ring that had marked every Blackwood heir since the early 1900s. Ethan accepted it beneath the chandeliers while cameras flashed, but his attention kept drifting toward the edge of the room, where Maya had resumed serving guests as if nothing had happened. She moved carefully among people who avoided meeting her eyes now. Some were embarrassed. Others were annoyed that the natural order had been interrupted. Vivian remained near the orchestra, smiling for photographs while anger sharpened every movement of her hands. Hours later, after the final car had disappeared beyond the iron gates, Maya carried a tray through the silent west corridor. The mansion felt different without music and conversation. Its marble floors reflected only the dim wall lamps, and the cold elegance of the place seemed to stretch for miles. She had nearly reached the service stairs when Ethan's voice stopped her. "Miss Carter." She turned. He stood near the library doors, his jacket removed, and the silver ring still resting on his right hand. Without the crowd around him, he looked less like a public figure and more like a man carrying a burden no one else could see. "Sir." Ethan glanced at the tray, then at her face. "Why did you refuse?" Maya understood the question immediately. Because an apology would have made the lie easier for everyone else. Most people here would call that pride. Most people here have never had to protect the last thing they own. Ethan's expression changed almost imperceptibly. "And what is that?" Maya met his eyes. "My self-respect." The answer settled between them. Somewhere beyond the windows, rain began tapping softly against the glass. Ethan had inherited houses, accounts, influence, and a name that opened every locked door in the city. Yet standing in that quiet corridor, he realized Maya possessed something no one in his family had ever managed to give him. She knew exactly who she was, even when the room demanded that she become smaller. "Good night, Miss Carter," he said at last. Maya continued toward the stairs, unaware that Ethan remained behind, watching until she disappeared from sight. For the first time since accepting the Blackwood ring, he wondered whether power meant commanding a room or refusing to let the room command you. By morning, the rain had washed the city clean, but nothing inside the Blackwood mansion felt renewed. Maya arrived in the breakfast room at 6:30, carrying a silver coffee service while the first lights spread pale gold across the long windows. Ethan sat alone at the head of the table, reading reports beside an untouched plate. He did not look up when she entered, yet she sensed his attention shift the moment her shoes crossed the polished floor. "Good morning, sir," she said. "Good morning, Miss Carter." The formality of his answer surprised her. Most employers addressed the staff only when issuing instructions, and Ethan Blackwood had never seemed interested in wasting words. Maya poured his coffee and turned to leave, but a photograph lying beside his papers caught her eye. It showed Ethan as a boy, perhaps 8 years old, standing beside a dark-haired woman whose hand rested protectively on his shoulder. Neither of them smiled. "That is none of your concern," Ethan said. Maya stopped. "I did not ask." "You looked. People look at photographs, sir. That is why they are kept." His eyes lifted to hers, cool and assessing, but there was no anger behind them. "You always answer this directly?" "Only when the question is direct." Before he could respond, Vivian entered wearing a cream coat and the composed expression of someone who had spent the night preparing her anger. She placed her handbag on the table and looked at Maya as though the room had been spoiled by her presence. "Leave us." Maya glanced toward Ethan. "You heard her," he said, though his voice carried none of the harshness Vivian expected. Maya inclined her head and walked toward the door. "Actually," Vivian added, "stay." Maya stopped again. Vivian moved closer, her heels striking the floor in precise, impatient beats. "I want you to understand what happened last night." Ethan defended the truth, not you. Do not confuse fairness with importance. Maya held the coffee pot steadily between both hands. "I have not confused anything, ma'am." "Good. Because people in your position sometimes mistake attention for invitation." The words hung in the bright room, polished and cruel. Ethan set down the report. "That is enough." Vivian turned toward him. "I am protecting what belongs to us. You are humiliating an employee in my home." She embarrassed me. "No," Maya said quietly. Both of them looked at her. "The truth embarrassed you." Vivian's face tightened. For one dangerous second, the room seemed smaller. Ethan could have dismissed Maya. He could have restored peace with a single command. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and studied the woman standing beneath the morning light, her uniform plain, her dignity untouched. Vivian gave a humorless laugh. "This is exactly what I mean. She thinks she can speak to me as an equal." Maya's voice remained calm. I do not need to be your equal to deserve respect. Silence filled the space between the three of them. Ethan looked at Vivian, then at Maya, and something in his expression hardened with decision. Miss Carter, you may return to your duties. Maya left without another word. When the door closed, Vivian demanded to know why he allowed such insolence. Ethan turned toward the rain-bright windows. For years, he had believed loyalty meant silence and love meant possession. Yet Maya Carter had entered his home with neither wealth nor influence, and somehow she was the only person within its walls who never asked permission to remain herself. Because, he said slowly, she was right. For the next several days, Ethan found reasons to remain in rooms where Maya happened to be working, though he never admitted the pattern even to himself. He appeared in the library while she dusted the shelves, in the conservatory while she watered the white orchids, and once in the kitchen just as she was dividing her lunch with Daniel, the elderly groundskeeper whose paycheck had been delayed by an accounting mistake. Maya never performed kindness for an audience. That was what unsettled him. She did not become gentler when she knew he was watching, and she did not become smaller when powerful people entered the room. She simply moved through the mansion with the same quiet certainty, as though dignity were not something granted by wealth, but something carried within the bones. On Thursday afternoon, Ethan paused outside the staff dining room after hearing laughter. Through the half-open door, he saw Maya sitting beside Mrs. Alvarez, the head cook, carefully repairing the loose strap of her worn handbag with a small sewing kit. You should let me buy you a new one, Maya said. Mrs. Alvarez shook her head. This was my daughter's gift before she moved to Arizona. I would rather keep fixing it. Maya smiled. Then we will make it last another 10 years. Ethan remained unseen in the corridor. In his world, damaged things were replaced, weak partnerships were abandoned, and sentiment was treated as an expensive liability. Yet Maya handled the faded leather as though its history made it more valuable, not less. Later that evening, he found her in the west garden gathering fallen branches after a strong wind had crossed the property. The air smelled of wet earth, and the last sunlight rested softly across the stone path. That is the groundskeeper's responsibility, Ethan said. Maya looked up. Daniel's knee is bothering him. Then he should have reported it. He was afraid he would lose hours. Ethan's jaw tightened. No one loses wages for being injured on this property. Perhaps no one told him that. Her answer was not accusing, yet it landed with uncomfortable precision. Ethan looked toward the greenhouse, where Daniel was moving slowly between rows of plants. You notice everything. Only the things people try not to show. Maya bent to pick up another branch. Ethan stepped forward and lifted the heavier end before she could stop him. Surprise crossed her face. You do not have to do that, sir. Neither do you. Together, they carried it toward the garden cart. The task took less than a minute, but the silence between them felt different from the silence of the ballroom. It was not cold. It was careful. When they reached the cart, Maya brushed dirt from her gloves and glanced toward the mansion. People will talk if they see you helping me. People always talk. You usually care what they say. Ethan looked at her. I am beginning to question why. Maya held his gaze, and for one brief moment the distance between Heir and Maid seemed measured not in status, money, or skin color, but in the truths each had been taught to hide. Then footsteps sounded near the terrace. Vivian stood beneath the archway, perfectly still, watching them beside the garden cart. Her expression remained composed, but her eyes had already understood what Ethan had not yet admitted. He was no longer merely observing Maya Carter. He was changing because of her. Vivian said nothing in the garden, but the silence she carried back into the mansion was colder than accusation. By nightfall, she had left without speaking to Ethan, and the staff moved carefully through the halls as though the house itself had become aware of a secret. Maya finished her duties shortly after 10 and was folding clean linens in the second-floor service room when she heard the front doors open below. Several voices followed, low and urgent, then stopped almost at once. She stepped into the corridor and saw Ethan crossing the marble foyer with one hand pressed against his side. His face was pale beneath the warm chandelier light, and his jacket hung unevenly from one shoulder. Two of his advisors stayed close, but Ethan dismissed them with a quiet command before they could follow him upstairs. Maya watched him grip the railing. Sir. He looked up sharply. Go back to work. His voice was controlled, but the effort behind it was unmistakable. You need a doctor. I said I am fine. Ethan took another step, then paused as if the staircase had shifted beneath him. Maya set down the folded sheet she was carrying and moved toward him. You are not fine. Miss Carter, this does not concern you. You are standing in front of me pretending you can barely remain upright without help. That makes it difficult not to notice. His eyes narrowed, yet he did not have the strength to argue. Maya guided him toward the small sitting room. Beside the foyer, keeping a respectful distance while making certain he reached the couch safely. There was no visible danger, only a dark stain spreading along the fabric near his ribs and the rigid way he guarded every breath. She opened the cabinet where the household medical supplies were kept and returned with clean cloth, water, and a first aid kit. Who told you where that was? Ethan asked. Mrs. Alvarez. This house has too many emergencies for no one to know. He almost smiled, but the expression vanished before it formed. Maya knelt beside the coffee table and placed the supplies within reach. I can call someone you trust. No calls. Then let me help until you decide what comes next. Ethan studied her as if searching for fear or curiosity, but found neither. You should be frightened of me. Maya's hands remained steady. I am frightened of many things, sir. That does not mean I abandon someone who needs help. The answer struck him more deeply than she knew. For years, people had stayed near Ethan because of his name, his money, or the protection his influence provided. Maya stayed because leaving would have been wrong. She cleaned the small wound with quiet care, never asking where he had been or who had caused the injury. The room held only the soft ticking of the mantel clock and the rain beginning again against the windows. Why are you not asking questions? He said at last. Because you would not answer them. And that does not bother you. Everyone is entitled to silence when they are hurting. Ethan looked away. On the wall across from him hung a portrait of his father, stern and unsmiling, a man who had taught him that pain should be hidden and mercy should be rationed. Maya secured the bandage and rose. You should rest. Ethan caught her gaze before she could leave. Stay until the dizziness passes. It was not an order. The difference surprised them both. Maya sat in the chair opposite him, and for the first time in his life, Ethan Blackwood allowed another person to witness his weakness without feeling diminished by it. The dizziness passed slowly, leaving behind a silence neither of them seemed willing to break. Ethan remained against the couch, one hand resting near the fresh bandage, while Maya sat across from him beneath the warm light of the table lamp. Outside, rain traced silver lines down the tall windows, softening the city beyond the estate into a blur of distant lights. You can go, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Maya looked at him carefully. Do you want me to go? The question unsettled him because no one asked Ethan Blackwood what he wanted unless the answer involved business, territory, or duty. He had been taught to issue commands, not reveal needs. No, he admitted. Maya settled back into the chair. For several minutes, the only sound was the mantel clock counting the distance between them. Ethan's gaze moved toward the photograph on a nearby table, the same one Maya had noticed at breakfast. His mother stood beside him in the image, elegant and distant, one hand resting on the shoulder of a boy who had already learned not to smile. She died when I was 10, he said. Maya followed his eyes. Your mother? He nodded. My father told me she trusted the wrong person. After that, he treated affection like a security risk. Ethan's mouth tightened with the memory. He said love gives people a door into your life, and sooner or later, someone uses it against you. Maya was quiet before answering. That sounds like fear wearing the clothes of wisdom. Ethan turned toward her. Few people would have dared speak so plainly, especially while he sat injured and exhausted. Yet her expression held no judgment. You think my father was afraid? I think people often call themselves strong when they are only afraid to be hurt again. The words settled into the room with more weight than accusation. Ethan looked down at the silver ring on his hand. It had felt powerful beneath the ballroom lights, but now it seemed heavy, almost borrowed. And you? He asked. What are you afraid of? Maya's eyes lowered briefly. Losing my mother before I can give her the life she deserves. Ethan remembered the employment records he had reviewed after the ceremony. Maya had taken the position to help cover medical expenses, but the file had reduced that truth to a few sterile lines. How ill is she? Her heart is weak. The doctors are hopeful, but hope has a price in this country. Ethan heard the exhaustion beneath her calm. You work here for her. I work wherever I can for her. Maya folded her hands. She spent her whole life protecting me from believing that poverty meant I was less than anyone else. The least I can do is protect her from facing this alone. Ethan studied her, struck again by the difference between them. He had inherited everything except tenderness. Maya had inherited almost nothing except the ability to give it. My mother used to play piano in the east parlor, he said. After she died, my father locked it. Maya looked toward the dark hallway. Why? He said music made the house sentimental. And did it? Ethan considered the question. It made the house feel alive. Maya's expression softened. Maybe that is what frightened him. A faint smile touched Ethan's face before he could stop it. Maya noticed, but she did not comment. That small mercy felt more intimate than praise. When she finally rose, the rain had softened to a whisper. You should sleep, sir. Ethan, he said. She paused. When we are alone, call me Ethan. Maya held his gaze, aware that the request crossed a line neither of them fully understood. Good night, Ethan. After she left, he remained in the quiet room, listening to her footsteps fade along the corridor. For the first time, his name sounded less like an inheritance and more like something human. The next morning, Maya found the east parlor unlocked. Pale sunlight spilled across the covered furniture, and dust floated through the quiet room like tiny fragments of memory. At the far end stood the piano Ethan had mentioned, its dark wood dulled by years of neglect. Maya hesitated at the doorway before stepping inside. Someone had removed the sheet that once covered it. She brushed her fingertips across the closed lid, but did not open it. You can, Ethan said from behind her. Maya turned. He stood in the doorway wearing a charcoal suit, his posture restored, though the careful way he moved revealed that his injury still troubled him. I do not play, she said. Neither do I anymore. He entered and stopped beside the instrument. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Why did you unlock the room? Maya asked. Ethan looked toward the tall windows. Because you were right. A house should feel alive. She studied him, uncertain whether the admission was meant for her or for the boy in the photograph. Your mother would probably be glad. You never met her. No, but I know what it means when someone leaves warmth behind. Ethan opened the piano lid and pressed a single key. The notes sounded thin at first, then widened into the stillness. Maya smiled softly. It needs tuning. Everything in this house does. Before she could answer, footsteps approached the hall. Vivian appeared in the doorway beside Marcus Reed, Ethan's uncle and senior advisor. Marcus carried a sealed envelope, his expression grave. We need to speak privately, he said. Ethan closed the piano. Then speak. Marcus glanced at Maya. Not in front of staff. Ethan's face cooled. Miss Carter can leave when I ask her to. The words were calm, but Vivian heard the protection beneath them. She stepped forward and placed the envelope on the piano. Perhaps she should stay. This concerns her. Maya felt the room tighten. Ethan opened the envelope and removed several printed pages. The first showed a bank transfer from a company connected to a rival family. The second appeared to be a message containing details about the Blackwood estate. At the bottom of both pages was Maya Carter's name. Ethan read them once, then again. His expression revealed nothing. These were found in the staff office, Vivian said. She has been selling information. Maya stared at the documents. I have never seen those before. Marcus's voice hardened. The account is registered under your name. Then someone used it. Vivian gave a quiet, disappointed sigh. How convenient. Ethan lifted his eyes to Maya. For the first time since the ballroom, doubt stood between them. Maya felt it more sharply than any insult Vivian had delivered. Ethan, she said, forgetting the others were present, I did not betray you. Marcus looked stunned by the familiarity. Vivian did not. She looked satisfied. Ethan's gaze moved from Maya to the documents, then toward the open piano, where one clear note still seemed to linger in his memory. Leave us, he said. Maya's face fell almost imperceptibly. Do you believe them? He did not answer quickly enough. That silence gave Vivian exactly what she wanted. Maya straightened her shoulders, the same way she had beneath the chandeliers. I understand. She walked past them without lowering her head, but Ethan saw the hurt she refused to show. When the door closed, Marcus began discussing security procedures. Ethan barely heard him. His attention remained on the empty hallway and the name Maya had spoken without fear only moments before. Vivian expected anger. Marcus expected judgment. Instead, Ethan placed the papers back inside the envelope and said, Find out who created these. Vivian's composure cracked. The evidence is obvious. Ethan turned toward her, his voice quiet and absolute. No, it is convenient. Maya Carter has never chosen the easy lie when the difficult truth would cost her more. Until someone proves otherwise, I trust her. The room went silent, and Vivian realized the danger was no longer that Ethan might care for Maya. The danger was that he already did. For the next 48 hours, Ethan said little, but the mansion moved under the pressure of his questions. Records were checked, access logs reviewed, and every staff account examined twice. Maya continued working because no one had ordered her to leave, though the silence around her had changed. Some employees avoided her. Others offered sympathy in quick glances they were too afraid to explain. She accepted neither pity nor suspicion. She polished silver, prepared guest rooms, and carried herself with the same calm she had shown in the ballroom. But each time footsteps approached, part of her wondered whether Ethan had finally decided that trust was a luxury he could not afford. On the third evening, Marcus entered Ethan's study with a folder in his hand and an expression that answered the question before he spoke. The account was opened 3 weeks ago using copies of Miss Carter's employment documents, he said. The messages came from a computer in the guest wing. Ethan looked toward Vivian, who stood near the fireplace in a white dress, perfectly composed. Who had access? Marcus hesitated. Her assistant used the room several times. Vivian's face went still. That proves nothing. Marcus placed another page on the desk. The transfer originated from a holding company managed by your family's attorney. The room became silent. Ethan did not raise his voice. Why? Vivian looked at him as though the question offended her. Because you were forgetting who you are. So you framed an innocent woman. I protected our future. Ethan rose slowly. The silver heir's ring caught the light as his hand rested against the desk. You tried to destroy her name because I treated her with respect. Vivian's restraint cracked. She is a maid, Ethan. She entered this house with nothing. And within weeks you were opening locked rooms, questioning family decisions, and standing beside her in the garden like the rules no longer applied. Perhaps the rules were wrong. Vivian stared at him. That answer frightened her more than anger could have. Before she could respond, the study doors opened. Maya stood there with a folded envelope in her hand. She had heard enough from the corridor to understand. I came to give you this, she said. Ethan saw the resignation letter before she placed it on the desk. You are not leaving. That is not your decision. Her voice remained steady, but the hurt beneath it was clear. You trusted me eventually, but for one moment, you looked at those papers and wondered whether people like me are always one accusation away from becoming guilty. Ethan stepped closer. You are right. The admission stopped her. I should have trusted what I knew about you before I trusted what someone printed on a page. Vivian gave a bitter laugh. You are apologizing to her? Ethan removed the silver ring from his hand. He placed it on top of Maya's resignation letter. The small sound echoed through the room. I am correcting a mistake. Marcus watched in disbelief. Vivian's face lost its color. Ethan turned toward them both. The engagement is over. The succession ceremony is canceled. I will not inherit a position that requires me to protect cruelty for the sake of appearances. Vivian stared at the ring. You would surrender everything for her? Ethan looked at Maya, but his answer was meant for the entire house. No, I am surrendering what prevents me from becoming someone worthy of her trust. Maya's breath caught. Ethan did not reach for her or ask forgiveness with grand promises. He simply stood before her without the ring, without the title, and without the shield he had carried all his life. I cannot undo the moment I doubted you, he said. But I can make certain no one in this house ever mistakes your dignity for something they are permitted to take. The room went silent, and Maya realized the ruthless heir had not chosen love because it made him weak. He had chosen truth because she had taught him what strength looked like.